Welcome back. Well, this is the big day. This is the day you've been waiting for, and nobody's been waiting for it any more than me. We're going to crank up this loading press and get it going. You know, I've been suffering through this because, instead of just putting it together and getting it going, which I normally would have done, I've been doing my duty and bringing to you everything I possibly can in its fullest form, so that you know exactly what's going on. And that's the purpose of what my donors, or Patreon donors, are all about. You've been providing me the financial wherewithal so that I can bring you things like this and show you in detail exactly how they perform. My goal here is not to, show off with a press. I don't know if this thing is going to work at all. My goal here is not to prove that the press is good or anything else. So far, I'm very impressed by what I have seen thus far. That's all I can report on. I can't report on what it's going to do in the future. But my whole purpose of doing these videos is to bring to you quality instruction and quality information, not biased, and I'm not promoting any product or anything or any specific agenda. So, whether it's up or down, I'll report about it. There have been some controversies about this particular press that I've seen in the blogs. It's a very new product. The product only came out about mid 2022. It hasn't been around that long, and production went into a short stoppage because they had some things to iron out, and I understand that whoever had to have updates for those machines were supplied with that. So I have no problem with that. I mean, anytime somebody buys something that's brand new, you're stepping out there in space. You have to assume that when something is very brand new, that there are going to be some initial bugs, because everything in research and development teams, everything the research and development teams do is basically a microcosm of what hundreds of people will be doing with it. So they're only looking at one particular press, and they're guided only by what they can see, and not all the eventualities that are going to come down. So this is a later press. This was made actually this month. I got this press mid-month, and it's marked, August of 2023. So it was literally days old when I received it. I will tell you that nothing is more important than all the other things combined. I mean, you have to have the cases, the primers, the powder, and the bullets, which are right here, and you have to have the dies. But if you don't read this manual, you're going to be adrift. I've been loading continuously ever since the early 70s. And I know a lot about reloading. I didn't know anything about this machine. Nothing, nada. All my preconceived notions about reloading, or my knowledge heretofore of loading with progressive presses, has nothing to do whatsoever with this particular machine, other than the fact that the dies do exactly the same thing and perform the same functions on the cartridges. Everything else is different, and I cannot presume to know anything about it without being guided by this manual. And that's what we're going to do. I'm going to bore you by reading the instructions, because when I read you the instructions, I'm reading the instructions as well, so that I know what I'm doing. I've already read through these things about 3 times, and I think I have a fair idea what's going down, but I haven't yet committed it to memory. It hasn't been, I don't have any muscle memory involved about what's going on. So basically, it's like I've got training wheels on. So I'm going to take you along, and we're going to do the same thing together, and without any preconceived bias or notions or anything else. So we're going to start out with station number 1. Step number 1 is adjusting the case feed. Now, you wouldn't think, somebody who has never used a case feed before would think that they just simply spin around and drop cases. Such is not the situation with these. They have to be adjusted in order to properly drop cases. That is, so that they not only drop down the tube, but so that they're oriented with the bases down and not up backwards. So it says loosen the thumb nut on the back of the collator assembly approximately a quarter of a turn. So there it is, quarter of a turn. Then it says for pistol cases, the sliding gate should be adjusted all the way to the left, which is closed. For rifle cases, move the sliding gate all the way to the left. That's this right here. That's all the way to the left. And place several cases into the collator assembly. Yeah, it's about, I think it's about a half a dozen cases there. Adjust the speed control to an intermediate setting and then turn the power switch on. Well, I love to know what I'm doing, so I'm going to put a index mark right here, just like it was a radio dial. And that way I'll know what an intermediate setting is. So let's see how far around that goes. It goes 3/4 of a turn. Well, 3/4 of a turn is 3/8 of a turn. So we'll go, there's a quarter right there. That would be an intermediate setting. Important to follow all instructions. Now, at this point, in the event there is a case that comes down that tube that is not oriented correctly, I don't want it to fall into the case feeding mechanism down below. So what I'm going to do is raise up that tube so that it blocks it. So if I lift the collator up just slightly and allow that tube to rest on the side of the mechanism down below, the case feeder down below, that will catch any cases before they drop down into the case feeder. And that way there I'm assured that I won't have to dig one out. So let's turn it on and see what happens. I'm going to move it a little bit to the right. Well, that's pretty nice. Now I moved it just slightly to the right, and as soon as I did, it began to cycle cases beautifully right down the chute. I'm going to leave it at that. I think that's a good adjustment. And I'm going to dump those cases out because I don't have them properly lubricated yet. Now the next step is to determine our tool head configuration, and this is simply typical. This is what each station normally represents, whether it's a standard procedure or operational process. Beginning with the first station right here is the station number 1. That's the case feed. There's nothing above that. Station number 2 is universal deprime die, and it says optional, but I always like to have a universal decapping die, and a decapping die is something which simply decaps. That's all it does. That's its entire mission, and it is universal because it'll work with any size cartridge case. So I'm going to put that right down into the number 1 position. I'm not going to rotate it all the way in. I've got a sizing die, and a sizing die is resized die is in station number 3. I certainly can put a resizing die in, and again I'll just simply place it in that position. The next one is the swaging station, and it came from the factory with a swaging die in there, so I'm going to leave it in and just back it out a bit. The next one is your priming station. There's nothing typically above the priming station. However, there could be something that you could put in there at a later date. Neck expanding operation is something which is not done for a rifle die. Certain dies can use a neck expander. There's a neck expander, for instance, for those people who do cast bullets. If you do cast bullets, you can sometimes get a long tapered expander which will ease insertion to prevent deforming of the bullets. So that's a special operation, but it's not going to be done here. The powder drop is right there. It's already in position, and the die is backed out considerably compared to its final position. Station number 6 is optional. You could put, if you wanted, put a powder check there. I haven't found a powder check yet that is suitable for this press. I'll be looking for one. And then finally, the bullet seating die. And we're going to put a bullet seating die in. That's the second to the last position without screwing it down too far. And then I've got a crimp die. So I'm going to put it at station number 10, which is your crimp position. So going around, station number 1 is your case feeding station. Station number 2 is your universal decapping die, and that's most important if you're decapping military cases, because this is a very robust die that has a unbreakable pin, and if it does encounter any serious resistance, like if you've got a rock in your case or something, the center pin will the decapping pin will just simply rise up, and you can reinstall it by loosening up this collet. And it's a very good die to have in almost any progressive press, because it does help stabilize this shell plate. Any dies that are in there opposed to one another will help stabilize the shell plate and prevent it from canting one way or the other. I mean, it's a very massive shell plate, but just the same, it's very, very wide, and therefore it has a lot of leverage to cant side to side. So it's good to have opposing pressure on it from both sides as the ram comes up. Now, this is your standard decapping station and sizing station. This is the swaging die. I've got vacant positions over the priming station. I've got a vacant position after that too, and then we've got the powder charging die at that station, and a vacant station where you could have a powder check die or some other system to alert you for low powder situation, or double charge in the case of pistols. Then finally we've got the bullet seating die and the factory crimp die. Okay, we'll begin by turning on the available lighting. I love that. That's nice. And we're going to be using one case to go around this entire process. This is pretty much standard procedure for any progressive die, for a progressive press, that is. So we're going to place a tiny bit of lubricant. I've always been very happy with this Lee lubricant. This is what's used in the industry for processing brass. Brass and steel. This is a metal forming lubricant, and it comes normally in 5-gallon and 55-gallon drums. So this tube lasts you for a long time. So I'm going to place a small, tiny drop of it onto the case. Never, ever apply wet lubricant above the shoulder, because placing lubricant in this place right here will cause case dents. If you have case dents, that's because you've got wet lubricant above that. Those are hydraulic dents. So this is I believe this is a case that has never been decapped before. I believe this is from some of my original stuff. We're going to simply drop this die down and lower the handle all the way. Never half stroke it. Now, it's a long way down to that shell plate, but there's enough travel on that thread to bring it down. Now I want to be absolutely sure that I'm bottomed out on that shell plate. Now, you don't have to use a wrench or anything like that to tighten it down any farther than that. Once it's tightly on top of that with finger pressure, you've got sufficient pressure on it. And the Lee locking rings are Those are my special. I love them. All the locking rings I've used over the years, as far as I'm concerned, are garbage. This is the way to go. They've got an O-ring at the bottom. Once I've installed that, it's adjusted. It's adjusted forever. I can remove that. I can remove that die by simply turning the whole die and the locking ring together, and it will come out and go back down to the same position again. So I don't want to half stroke that. Bring it all the way back down, and there we go. So we're going to begin with station number 2, inserting the case into the shell holder. This button here, I like this. This is a nice system. You don't have any levers to move out of the way or anything. It's a spring-loaded button, so you just simply push it down, and the case goes right in over it. So we're going to activate that ram. Well, that was very smooth. I would say that was a success. So we've got one station already set up. Actually, 2 stations. We've got the shell feeding station set up. We've got the universal decapping set up. Now we'll have to turn to the standard sizing die. I'm going to take this case out first of all. Set it aside. Make sure you don't get it mixed up with an unlubricated case. We'll drop the ram all the way to the lowest position, and you know, I can tell that's not going to have enough thread to do that. I've got about 7/8 of an inch to go down below here, and I don't have 7/8 of an inch left on that thread. So the solution to that is quite simple. We'll place the lock ring underneath. Just reverse it, and you can see right here this has got a rubber O-ring. These are fabulous. As a matter of fact, they've over the years, the last few years now, they made it to this cog design instead of the old wrench, because people were using wrenches on these not only unnecessarily, but damaging the whole system. So these require no wrench whatsoever. They never come loose, and you don't have any set screws to worry about. Those are a nuisance. So anyway, we'll put this in here and bring the ram down. We'll tighten that die. Now this is where we not only follow the instructions that go along with the press, but anything that might conflict with the instructions of the manufacturer of the dies, you follow the die manufacturer's instructions, and that's specifically noted in the Frankford Arsenal book. So let's take a look at that set of instructions for the dies right now. So Lee's die instructions for the full-length resizing die is to bring it down to the shell holder, then release the pressure and give it a 1/4 turn more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark this die right here just as I did before, and I know that from that point there I'm going to mark it on my press, and I'm going to go 1/4 turn from there and screw my lock ring on. Just finger tight, that's sufficient. And now we'll check it out, make sure that you can feel that cam down. That's applying a little bit more pressure than is necessary. And be careful, do not half cycle it. I can't state that more emphatically. Anytime you start to go up, go all the way up. Anytime you start to go down, go all the way down. You can break mechanisms very easily by applying the kind of leverage that they have at the wrong time. So it has a nice firm closure by that 1/4 of an inch. That assures that everything will work properly. Now we'll take that sized case, the lubricated case, and we'll insert it into that station And again, make sure it's a lubricated case. Bring it all the way down, and that just sized that. And now, in the instructions, it recommends to use a chamber checker. In other words, use a case checker to a gauge to check to make sure your case is fully sized. Well, I don't have one, but yes, I do. If you have a rifle, you have a chamber gauge. So this is our chamber gauge. Simply insert the case as it normally would be and close it. Firm, tight lockup, and to be sure that it is a lockup, we'll fire that, and there it is. That couldn't fire if it was not completely locked up. So we're good. So what we need to do is back off this stop collar, this stop nut, with the press in the fully down position, and turn this stop underneath here down toward the press until it makes full firm contact. Don't use pliers on these beautiful checkered surfaces. That's the last thing you want to do. So this stabilizes the head, and I do believe that this is the cause of many headaches. People do not bother to adjust this down and lower the depth stop an additional quarter turn and tighten the depth stop lock nut. So as with many things, in other words, we want to apply positive pressure. So we're going to raise this up, and I'm going to mark that so I can see my quarter turn. I'll mark it right here. I can see with my magic marker, and I'm going to give that. Now it should be easier to turn. I'm going to need my flashlight to see my mark on the black. There we go. Now that I've got that quarter turn, now I apply this lock nut at the top, and again we'll tighten that down. This is a 1¼ inch wrench. That's sufficient. That's going to stay forever. Don't have to torque it down heavily. It's just a matter of tightening it up. And we'll try it. Go all the way down. Make sure it's got good firm contact. There's no light protruding through there. We're good. That's nice. Okay. So now we're going to be turning our attention to the swaging station. Now, as the term implies, it's for swaging primer pockets, and that's only necessary with crimped primer cases. If you have a crimped primer, you absolutely have to swage the primer pocket before you can insert a fresh primer. So this would not be applicable to the majority of pistol and rifle cases that you'd ever shoot, but it certainly applies to military crimped primer pockets. So, starting with the instructions, we look to the lower tool block right here. This is the machine that operates the swage and primer pins, and it says to lower the ram all the way down. Thread the swage pin into the lower tool block until the top of the swage pin does not protrude above the case support surface of the shell plate. It doesn't say that this is an adjustment. This is so that it does not protrude above. The standard place for a swaging pin is naturally above the support surface. The support surface is that part of the shell plate that presses on the case head. But it wants us to get that out of the way. So we're going to back off the lock nut right here, which was not tightened at all, and we're going to back off that swaging pin until it's no longer above the support surface of the shell plate. Then it says to turn the die down until it contacts the shell plate. and be absolutely certain that you're not getting a false reading up here and that you're not being impinged by this lock ring, because a lot of times people will think that they're down on the shell plate when in fact they have another turn or two to go because the lock ring has made contact first. So whether you're going to use the swaging pin is entirely dependent upon whether you're going to be using military cases. But you know, it's always good to have any dies available that can be placed down onto the shell plate. Will help stabilize the shell plate and prevent any canting. So even if I don't use the swage pin, I certainly will keep that. I'll keep that in place all the time. I don't generally recommend using a crude instrument such as an adjustable crescent wrench, but this does not require a large amount of torque. All we're doing is simply turning it so it will not back off. If I have my druthers, I'd get myself a Lee collar to go on there, but that's in there permanently. So that's the first adjustment we have to make, is to place the die itself down on the shell plate. The next step is to raise the ram to its topmost position and insert the deprimed and sized case from the previous step. So we'll place that in there. Loosen the M8 nut on the case support pin. That's up here. And thread the case support pin out of the die body approximately 1 inch. Lower the ram to the bottom of the stroke. Use a flathead screwdriver and screw down that support pin until it contacts the case. Again, keep that lock nut out of the way. Once it contacts it, it says to go 1/4 of a turn more, so take note of where that screw is positioned and turn it 1/4 of a turn additionally, and then secure the lock nut. Now we'll use a screwdriver to secure that in position so that it doesn't turn, and using a 9/16 wrench, secure that. Lock it down tightly. Now I've reviewed the instructions extremely carefully, and I do believe that there is a misprint in the instructions. The instructions are that the head is raised in the upper position, and at the same time to thread this swage pin out until the shoulder of the swage pin is flush with the shell plate. That would be physically impossible, because by the time you actuate the press, that swage pin would be almost 1 inch high. So that's physically impossible. What I do know is at the beginning of the instructions, it indicated to set up this tool block flush with the pin itself. That makes a lot of sense, because as I was operating it previously, I had no interference, and I believe that was raising to the correct level. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look underneath here, and I'm going to look visually and feel physically with my finger until I know that that's absolutely flush. Then we'll simply take a 5/16 inch wrench to secure that pin in place, as we use a 1/2 inch wrench to tighten it, because you don't want to tighten it without securing that pin, otherwise it's going to turn. So 1/2 inch wrench for the lock nut, and secure that pin from turning and tighten it securely. We should be able to place a case in there and check that. Perfect. Now, I can't remove a case when it's in the primer station. So it has to be double cycled, and I'll take that out and we'll move on to our next station. So we've got now the swaging stations completely set up. Now we're going to be going to the priming station. This step is somewhat similar to the swaging pin. Now you're turning your attention to the priming pin. I'll loosen up this 1/2 inch lock nut down at the bottom here, just lift it up a little bit, and we're going to raise this all the way up until the pin is flush with the shell plate surface. Now, spying inside, I can clearly see the top of that priming pin, and sometimes it's easier to start out high and then lower down. That's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to feel inside there with a flat bladed screwdriver to make sure that there's no protrusion, because that's where you want to be. You want to make sure that that primer is put in flush with the bottom of the case. Now I can angle my flashlight through the side here, and then I can put my screwdriver, flat bladed screwdriver, down on top of that and determine whether that's flush. And it's a little high. Just go small turns. You don't want to overcompress. You don't want to overcompress a primer. And that feels like it's still a little tiny bit high. And drop it down just a touch. That actually feels pretty good. I don't feel any protrusion, but I'm going to screw it up just barely a 1/16 of a turn, because I like to press the primers in fully, and if it's compressing them too much, it's a very easy thing to back that off a little bit. So once again, take note of where the language is on that pin, so that if you accidentally think you moved it, you'll know. And we're going to secure this 1/2 inch lock nut. Now we have to check it out with a primer. Now with the primer follower removed, take one live primer, and with the cup side, the open side up, carefully insert it. Actually, I'm going to take this off, make things easier, get it out of the way, and just carefully insert that so it doesn't tip over on you. I could hear it drop all the way to the bottom, and there we go. Raise the ram now and verify that a primer has entered position number 2. I see the primer now, it's just appeared. So now I can take that follower out. Without a stack of primers on top of it, it probably was just being a little lazy getting down to the bottom. We're in position number 2. I believe that's where we're supposed to be. Now we have to insert a case, that same decapped and swage case, and bring it to the next station. That's going through the swaging station, and now that one, I could see that primer coming right around underneath the case. So we'll see how our adjustment was. And we have some protrusion there. So we're going to have to turn that down. I would say, based on my experience, that's probably about a 1/2 turn, and we'll do it again. Now this calls for a new case, because we've got a primed case there. We can discard that, or if you have a hand priming tool, feel free to seat that primer. We're going to begin again afresh by placing that case into the second station and cycling it. It's a lubricated case, and cycling it until we get to that station. And swage. Now we leave that in the downward position and insert our new primer. These little operations can be tedious, but you have to do them. Make sure you don't get lubrication on your fingers. We want to insert that primer until it drops to the bottom. This time I'm going to use the I'm going to shut off that alarm so it doesn't irritate us. I'm going to use the primer follower to help assist that primer getting down into the station, and raise it to the top of the stroke. I don't see a primer yet, so we're going to advance it one more time. We'll keep advancing it until primer appears in that. There's a hole right here. You can see this I guess is position number 2. It was a little bit lazy coming around the last time because there we go. I can see it now in this position. That means it's on deck. It's ready to go into the case. So we'll have a case ready for it, and you can see that that's been decapped. It's ready for priming, and hopefully this one will that primer moved right around. I like that system. And let's see if we improve the situation. I would say that that's a perfect primer depth. But what I'm going to do, just to make sure it's not spongy, you don't want to have it's not going to be stable ignition unless that anvil is being struck with force. So I'm going to get my Lee hand priming tool and see if I can feel by hand, see if I can detect any degree of squishiness. Now you're just going to have to believe me with this one. I'll see if my thumb is telling me that needs. Right now I'm contacting the primer. We'll see if that wants to go deeper. Negative. That was a tight, perfectly tight primer. It didn't go in one iota. So we've got a good adjustment there. Now for this operation, I brought a case into position. This is an unprimed case in case I have to reuse it. But this case control tab right here, this gray piece of material, that has to be loosened up to two retention screws. So we'll loosen that up. Just to back off the screws such that you can move that forward until it contacts the shell. This is making sure that the primers will always be seated exactly dead center. So we'll tighten this one, and because there are two screws, we can be sure that I'm just going to gently, not forcefully, but gently push that over and tighten this screw here. This is a 2.5 millimeter Allen wrench. This is nice because one of the problems with a lot of presses is that the primers will sometimes not enter the case correctly. You don't want to apply monstrous torque to that because this is only a plastic part. I should say it's probably a nylon part. It looks very rugged, but you don't want to apply excessive pressure. And we'll cycle that one out of the way. And it got right by that with no trouble whatsoever. We'll see how this, again comes into place. Swaging, priming, and bypasses beautifully. Okay, that's a dead station right there. There's no operation on that station. Now I've made an executive decision that applies to me. I don't recommend this to anybody. I'm just going to give you my own personal opinion based on my years of having used a RCBS Uniflow powder measure, which works exactly on the same principle as this. I know that everybody is typically concerned that powder will compact and change its density in the charging process as the powder level goes down. That has not been my experience. My experience has been that these deflectors, they certainly don't do any harm, but the deflectors are a nuisance because you cannot look down and see whether or not you have powder remaining inside. I always want to be able to visually inspect and see powder inside. I've done a lot of loading using a powder measure, and I have never found that compaction is an issue, no matter what kind of powder it is. I think the physics speaks for it. For one thing, powder is not easily compacted. The only way you can compact extruded powders or most powders is to forcibly compress them using a bullet. I've never seen where there's any indication whatsoever where I have lighter or heavier charges based upon the powder volume in the hopper. So I'm going to take out that fancy little doohickey. Like I say, I prefer the convenience of being able to look down inside, knowing what I have for powder remaining, that there's none remaining that got stuck in place, and that can happen. You know, you can easily have powder that clings to the side of any surface, and you want to be absolutely certain that that's not happening to you, because you could have, if you had some pistol powders that remained and you're charging rifle cases, you can blow your rifle up. So I'm going to take that last screw out, and we'll proceed from there. Now, like I say, if you have a differing opinion, that's quite fine. That's all right. I don't have any objection to that. But I'm just simply saying that I'm taking it out because, to me, the nuisance is far greater than whatever slight benefit that I haven't noticed, that I haven't observed whatsoever in my many years of loading. So, and most of the time, when you're loading with a progressive press, you know, you're loading oftentimes with spherical powders, ball powders. That's a very popular powder, and those certainly don't compress under any circumstances. So I'm going to align those holes and reinsert those screws. Now, I certainly don't want to suggest that the station directly in front of the powder charging station is not important, because if you're a pistol loader, you're certainly going to be using this station. This is your case neck expansion die, and that's important. Now, if you have a die which, such as a Lee die or some dies that incorporate powder charging at the same station as the case expansion die, then you'll have to remove the powder charging facility and just use the case expansion facility. So just simplify your die. But that's certainly not an unimportant station, and just follow the instructions regarding the setup. Now we're moving on to the powder measure setup. Place an empty cartridge case in station number 7. So we've got an empty cartridge case, so we're going to be placing this case in that station. little bit fussy because I got that rod in the way, that repositioning rod. There we go. It's in there. And lower the ram to the bottom of the stroke. Well, I can immediately see what it needs to do. The charging drum has not gone fully to its top position. And thread the powder die into station number 7 of the tool head until the micrometer contacts the top of the slot in the body of the powder measure, and then back the die out 1/4 of a turn. So this is all standard. This is what you would do with any press, but just simply turn that. I think I'm going to need to back this locking ring off considerably. Adjusted that camera so you can see what's going on. Watch this thimble as it rises. Get that lock ring out of the way again. Those are a nuisance when they're in the way. They can give you false readings. So anyway, we're watching until that contacts. You can tell when that immediately contacts because your die does not want to go any further. And that says to back it off 1/4 of a turn. I'm going to use my marker, and I'm going to make a mark right there. I love to do this. It's the easy way, and you don't have to worry about trying to figure out where your 1/4 turn is. And it will come off easily enough with alcohol. So I'm backing that off by 1/4 of a turn. That gives it some clearance. A little bit more. There we go. And we'll lock this down. And I'll just gently give that. Don't use force on these lock rings. Just, there is no torque factor. Just simply use the wrench to apply greater pressure than it would be with your own fingers. And make sure that this is oriented so that it's centric. Now with that lock ring tightened, and we know that the throw is 100% minus 1/4 of a turn, we're all set up. The only thing we haven't done is adjusted the powder measure for the actual charge that we're going to be throwing. Now, I could skip by this because this is something which pretty much speaks for itself. But if you've watched some of my previous videos, you'll know that I have a little trick that I use, and I'll basically describe it right here. Instead of fiddling, as so many people do, for 15 minutes trying to get wind the thimble to the correct load, there's a much easier way. Simply weigh out the exact charge that you want. Say you're loading a case, you need 50 grains of powder. Weigh out the 50 grains of powder. Back off your thimble. This is another reason why I like to have that visibility. Back off your thimble until that 50 grains of powder goes down, descends down into the hole. In other words, the hole that you're creating by backing off this stem. Once you've backed off the stem such that it allows all that powder to go down into that hole, we want to put that case in position, and that's not in position, that's in position. So we want to put the case in position and only bring it up until it's thus. When the thimble is horizontal, now the powder is trapped and it can't go anywhere. As you turn the thimble in and gently bring pressure to bear on the powder, now you've got the correct volume within probably 1/2 grain or less. It's extremely useful to do that little procedure. And remember, don't half stroke. And that's it. That's how you adjust it. So create a cavity which is identical to the powder charge. Then you can make your fine adjustments. And usually, by doing it in this manner, you can be done setting up your charging station in less than a minute and a half. I mean, it's just 2 or 3 settings, 2 or 3 tries, and you got it perfect. Now, this is vitally important. This reset rod on the back of the powder measure must be set so that it ensures that the powder measure returns each time to a fully open condition. So I call this the fail-safe rod. Bring those jam nuts up beneath the press and then back it off by just a half a turn and secure it with the lock nut underneath it. Well, there you go. That's all the way up contacting the press. Then I'll back it off by a half a turn and then bring the jam nut up to it and secure it. They're 9/16 inch in diameter, so you can imagine me tightening those up. I'll do that off camera because I'm holding the camera with one hand. Okay, now that we've completed charging our case, we've moved past that to the vacated station, which could be a powder checking station, and now I'm at the bullet seating station. I have removed this lock ring because I know, based upon the other die, that it's not going to be long enough. The die would not be long enough to go down and make contact without that clearance. So we'll place this lock ring on the underside, the same as we did with the other one, and we'll bring this down to a fully contacted position. Now we're going to consult the Lee book. Now the Lee manual says to lower this die until it contacts and then go 1/4 of a turn additionally, which is what I'll do, 1/4 turn, and then we'll secure that with my lock ring. Just remember, if you're using Lee dies and you're doing this, to invert your locking ring so that the O-ring is in contact with the die head. And there, that's done. I'm going to cycle that down one time and make sure that we're fully contacted. And we are. And the bullet seating stem is adjusted according to the depth that you wish to seat a bullet. So we're at the final station now where we would need to have a bullet in position in order to finish adjusting the factory crimp die. And that's So we've got ourselves a Frankford Arsenal X-10 progressive reloading press. I'm very satisfied with today's work. It's enough for today. I'm not going to be trying to reload ammunition right now. It's just with the videos long enough. But we'll certainly be doing that in a future upcoming video. I thank my Patreon donors and for all the help that you've given me financially so that I can have the things that I can show you. And I wish to ask you, please give me a thumbs up if you like this video, and hit the subscribe button if you haven't already done so, and that little bell. Thanks for watching. God bless.